Hi, welcome to Set Your Intention podcast with Lory Passov. With 18 years of experience running startup companies, I was at the top of my career when I hit burnout and had to reevaluate what I wanted in my life. And now I talk to successful business leaders who have basically done it all in their career, all while being parents and striving to find balance in their lives. Hi, I'm Lory Passov. Welcome to the Set Your Intention podcast, where we talk to successful business leaders who are doing it all while raising children and trying to find some balance in their busy lives. Today, we have a very special guest, Olivia Rutman, founder of Childcare Finder. After 14 years in the finance industry, has pivoted her career while also raising 3 young boys, doing it all. And we are here to just talk to her about the ups and downs and everything in between. And I'm so excited that you're here. Thank you so much for being here today, Olivia.
Thank you for having me, Lory.
Thank you. Well, could we start by telling our listeners a little bit about how you decided to pivot after 14 years in finance and kind of what drove you to start your whole new business?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll always be grateful to Wells Fargo. I had a great career there. I started out at 18, very young, and, really got to grow within the company, which was, it feels like there's not a lot of places that still do that, right? Where you can start
Yeah.
entry level and stay there and continue to kind of grow with the company forever. And so, learned a lot of great skills there. But ultimately, coming out of COVID, I went into COVID with 1 boy. I came out of COVID with 3 boys, 3 and under. And so I had a newborn at home and had to start figuring out, okay, I got to start going back to work. We got to start getting the kids in childcare now, which you really couldn't do during COVID. And they were starting to be ready for more than just, a nanny at home. And so I found myself in a situation where I had to find care for all 3 kids at the same time. And, the average time it takes a parent to secure childcare is 3 to 6 months. So if you multiply that by 3 and you take 4 to 5 months of maternity leave, which I am very fortunate because not everybody gets that much, there was still no way the math was going to work out. And so I spent about 3 months and secured preschool for my oldest son. And then I had to start all over again, right? And so
Yeah.
I think at that point in time, I was just about going back to work or really close when I finally figured it out for my middle son. But the baby, I hadn't even started. And so, and then once you get into the point where you already have 1 or 2 kids in childcare and you want to keep a newborn home, affording a full-time nanny with 2 other kids in care is just completely not doable, right? That's more than a whole income at that point. And so I really started to just get so frustrated, like, and every resource I leveraged, I could only find one thing, right? There wasn't a place where I could find each of these 3 things in one spot, right? You have different kids with different needs at different times. And so if you need a preschool, a home daycare, and a nanny, right? There's not one place you can go to figure that out. And so honestly, a moment of frustration, just like, why is there not one place for parents? I don't have time for this. That kind of turned into the idea. And then, all of the other things kind of came through the market research, right? What does it need to look like? Okay, it's got to be a one-stop shop. You've got to be able to filter by what you need so it doesn't take 3 to 6 months of searching. We need to facilitate nanny share for families who have multiple kids and have an older kid and then a baby, right? And so all of those kind of gaps that existed in the marketplace was what we were setting out to fill.
Oh, incredible. And then how did you decide just to take that jump?
That was scary. Maybe a little not the smartest decision I ever made, being responsible for a family of 5, but I've always sort of believed that, you get out of things what you put into them. And I've never been a 1 foot in, 1 foot out kind of half-assed kind of person, right? It's like, okay, even in banking, right? I cared so much about everything I worked on. Even you're like, in the grand scheme of things, did that really matter? I don't know. But when I'm in it at the time, it's my baby. And so I just sort of felt like if I'm going to do this and make this successful, I have to give it everything. And so I decided, the plan was ultimately once the website's built and ready, then I'm going to quit so I can just sell full time, right? That would be the plan. Of course, nothing went according to plan, which I'm sure we'll get into. But
Yeah.
that was really the intention was, if I only give it, half or a quarter of me, right, then I'm only going to get, that good of a result. And so
Yeah.
I believed in it so much. I felt so strongly parents everywhere needed it. And so I
Hmm.
had to sort of take one for the team as I thought and say, I'm just going to go all in to make this happen.
Yeah, well, good for you for recognizing what an issue that was and then taking it upon yourself to try to fix something. It's really amazing.
Moms solving their own problems. Yeah, yes, definitely can change the world, but also sometimes you realize, gosh, what was I thinking all at the same time?
Yeah. So, with that, what were some of the sacrifices you had to make to start this whole new journey?
Well, one was a whole lot of money, whole lot of savings, right? We had sold our first house kind of in Carlsbad, and so we used pretty much all of the proceeds to start the new company. And when
Yeah.
you're a first-time founder, there's just so many mistakes that you're going to make, right? And you don't see that ahead of time,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
So that can make it really, really challenging. Is like you just you have your plan and you're so excited about it and you just don't know all of the different things and disasters that are about to come your way. And so, from a capital efficiency perspective and from a timing perspective on when do you quit your job and even just to how to
Hmm.
develop software
Yeah.
affordably, because you could spend hundreds of thousands, if not
Oh,
millions of
for
dollars, probably
sure.
in some
Yeah.
cases, to develop a company, right? Even software or hardware. And so not knowing how to navigate that, not having sort of a technical kind of co-founder who helps own it and build it, all
Mm.
of those things are just going to suck up a lot more capital. And they're
Yeah.
definitely, it's all just a big roller coaster of ups and downs. But I think that's one of the biggest things. Another thing that you don't really think about and plan for is, when you have a corporate job, and some people are better at this than others, but sometimes you're able to turn it off, right? And I always
Hmm.
made it a point throughout my years that when I took time off, I left the country. I went international
Oh,
so
wow.
I could say, sorry, I'm not reachable, right? And sort of I always had an excuse like I'm in Indonesia. I can't talk to you while I'm on vacation, right? And so I always kind of did that very well. And
Yeah.
when you're an entrepreneur, you simply do not have that luxury. And, you're probably not leaving the country as much, but it's also just even when you're not working or actively kind of in something, the weight of
Mm.
being an entrepreneur and the worry and the stress is literally there 24/7. And I
Mm.
feel like more in corporate life, you'd get stressed and it would come in these spikes, but I mean, it's almost laughable now that I think about the things I used to get stressed out about working in
Uh-huh.
banking with a stable corporate job compared to the things that I'm worrying about now. It's just a
Yeah.
whole different level of the weight of the world being on your shoulders every minute of the day.
Oh, that must be a lot.
It is. Entrepreneurship is not for the weak, but you know, the the moments, the wins, right,
Mm.
are also that much more significant,
Yeah.
right? Like, when you do something incredible and you literally did it and built it and saw it, help someone or change something, like nothing can compare to that you could get working for someone else. So I guess you get kind of those highest highs and lowest lows, but
Yeah.
I think when you're building a mission-driven company that's like working
Mm.
towards the greater good, it's like that's really what's driving you and getting you to keep going even when it just gets so unbelievably hard.
Yeah. So you mentioned some of those wins. What are a few examples of stuff that have just like made you feel, oh, this is working. This is going to be amazing.
Well, definitely when you first launch something and get your first user, right? Like those are
Yeah.
just such exciting moments. When you get your first paying customer, it's an incredibly exciting moment. And then
Yeah.
there's kind of some bigger societal things, right? Like when you're, so a lot of people don't, and coming in banking, people often think like, oh, about fundraising and all these things, but like, no, one has nothing to do with the other. So I knew
Yeah.
nothing about the world of venture capital. I had never
Mm-hmm.
fundraised in my life. I'd always taken care of myself. So the notion of asking somebody for money was just like this
Yeah.
horrible, fear that I didn't want to do. And so that learning that world from scratch and understanding there's so many things you didn't know, right? So like during COVID and kind of up until the point that I went to do this, people were raising money on very high valuations with, basically a napkin drawing of their idea, right? And
Yeah.
then the week that I quit my job to go full time, Russia invades Ukraine, Silicon Valley Bank fails, and all investments just stop, right? The market freezes. Nobody raises money pretty much for the next like year and a half, 2 years. And
Oh
so
my
it was
gosh.
just the timing is another just huge thing you can't predict. And like, there's
Yeah.
people building now with, consumer packaged goods or hardware that, or tariffs are flattening them, right? So there's so many
Hmm.
unknown market factors that can just
Right.
totally cripple you that you don't have any idea are coming. And so then I start to learn, okay, only 0.5% of companies ever raise a dollar in venture funding. Had no
Mm.
idea it was that low. Of that 0.5%, women founders get 2%, right? Then
Wow.
you take into consideration things like being a marketplace or being in the care economy, right? And that decimal percentage just gets, laughably small. And
Yeah.
so those are the odds that you're up against. So I think the day that we became a venture-backed company and beat that
Mm.
completely absurd decimal point, and it's like it makes you feel like, it's a win for women entrepreneurs everywhere.
Oh,
Like,
for
yeah, I did
sure.
this, we did this thing, but maybe we can increase the percentage just a little bit and kind of
Yeah.
continue towards doing that. And it's just one of those things, 2%, right, of all this venture capital. And there are women just with these incredible companies all over the place and
Yeah.
funding and working to solve problems that no one has solved before, right? Like care economy, women's health, all these things have been so under researched and
Hmm.
underfunded that the market opportunities are massive. And like there's
Yeah.
so much money that could be made in these spaces, but venture capitalists are predominantly men. And,
Hmm.
the check writers are not the ones who are finding childcare and who are going through menopause and all of these other
Hmm.
things, right? So venture capital is not going in those directions. And so,
Yeah.
those types of wins where you actually feel like, wow, nationally, globally, there could be some impact here by something I'm doing. There's just no replacement for that type of feeling and that type of accomplishment.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. During that time when you were, kind of hitting this roadblock and nobody's investing, how did you keep going? How did you keep your mindset in any bit of a positive way?
I guess maybe that's where becoming really, really stubborn and really, really
Hmm.
determined can somehow
Yeah.
benefit, right? So if you have a really strong-willed, stubborn child, you just have to think of them as a leader in training, right? Like that
Yeah.
tenacity is
Yeah.
going to pay off one day. I know
I
it's
get
not
that.
today. We've got a 2-year-old refusing to put their shoes on and get dressed, but I think that's the only reason, and I just recently gave kind of a keynote on this, like I think the only real difference maker for me was that the grit, right? Like, because it kind
Hmm.
of combines the persistent and the determination with like the resilience of every time
Yeah.
you get knocked down, you're
Yeah.
going to get back up. I don't care if you knock me down 200 times. I am going to get up the 201st time and I'm going to
Mm.
keep going. And I think that may not be the answer for everybody. And I totally understand that. Like
Yeah.
sometimes you can get to the point where, you feel something has really taken your life in a very negative way. And that
Hmm.
that does happen, right? From time to time, even with my own company, that's happened.
Yeah.
But I think you have to see the path out of it and know that like I've talked to hundreds of parents and childcare providers and things building this, right? And I heard what
Yeah.
they told me and I heard that, I see the market need. I live the frustration myself. And so I think when you're in those positions where you have something and it's
Hmm.
just a matter of getting the world to see and continuing to scream about it until people finally realize. And you know and it gets hard, right? I mean, you have to, family comes first. You have to make all these other choices. And I think maybe sometimes the best thing you could do is kind of go back to work, right? Which I've done. Like I've worked contract work for another company, why I
Mm.
continue to build my company. And so I think sometimes those difficult decisions need to be made, but when you've
Hmm.
got something special that can change, like it's more of just I'm not going to let it go and I'm going to
Yeah.
keep going no matter how hard it gets, how dark it gets. And, as you kind of emerge out of that, it's like people kind of see, especially investors, that you've kind of become battle tested a little bit. And
Yeah.
sometimes they're just kind of waiting to see, well, are you going to be around in 6 months and what's going to
Mm.
happen? And so when you continue to show people, I'm going to show up, I'm going to make progress, I'm going to do this with or without your money, then that's
Mm.
what starts to get people to the point where they say, okay, well, maybe now I'll give you my money because you've
Yeah.
kind of proven that you're going to figure this out regardless of if I write you a check or not. And so I think that really is the difference maker for so many founders, are the ones that just say, like, no matter what happens, I'm going to keep going one way or another. And
Yeah.
as long as I can, right? Until the market is telling me that they don't want what I'm building, right? That's
Hmm.
a different situation. But if people are saying we need this, please,
Mm.
then you just find that will to say, like, I will
Yeah.
get there and I will make it to that other side. And, things will be better because of that.
Wow, that resilience and determination is just so inspirational in your story. So I really appreciate everything you are doing for women and for childcare for the future. You mentioned family first. So how do you show up as a parent, as a business leader? How have your kids kind of played into all of this?
Yeah, I mean, there's some things that are easier, right, and better, and some things that are harder, right? So, like, one example is, the tech industry in general is not built for parents, right? Pretty much
Hmm.
every tech event ever is in the evening at,
Yeah.
6 o'clock, right? And so those are really painful sacrifices, and you really have to
Hmm.
navigate, what am I going to show up at, what am I not, and pick and
Hmm.
choose. And, I don't think there's any mom out there who goes to something like that and misses, putting her kids to bed, where it's not like a huge knife in
Yeah.
the heart, right? Even if it's
Yeah.
one night, it's painful, right? And there'll be
For
events,
sure.
you'll be in tears on the way home. It happens. But
Oh.
there also are some things where if you just say, okay, well, I'm not going to work tomorrow because I'm taking my kid to Legoland instead, right?
Hmm.
Or I'm going to move this meeting so that I can be there for the Valentine's party, right? Like,
Yeah.
you have the autonomy to say no, and you have to deal with whatever, fallout may come of you doing that. But there hasn't been anything that I've regretted. And you'll always put in
Hmm.
whatever extra time or work. I work on, nights at weekend nap time. I'm sitting here typing away, right? But you do have that flexibility and that ability to say, I'm going to run my life, my company, my family kind of how I want, to a certain extent, and be able
Yeah.
to say, I'm not going to travel for that event. I don't think I'm going to get the value out of it, right? But when you work a corporate job, you don't have the luxury of picking and choosing your travel schedule
Hmm.
or what you're going to attend or
Yeah.
not. So I think you kind of get both, where it's like, I have the ability to show up and control certain things and contribute to school events and things that I want. But then I have those really hard times where I know there's this important thing I'm going to have to miss this night or this Saturday or whatever it is, and that will be challenging. But I don't think that's specific to being an entrepreneur. I think all working parents kind of have to navigate that. But I think when you're an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, you're more empowered to pick when you're going to make those sacrifices and when you're not.
Yeah, and how does that feel compared to like working in the corporate world, at least having that autonomy and that choice?
I think I think my timing of everything made a really big difference for me, because I traveled, nonstop in the corporate
Mm.
world. And I actually have this giant collage called Spencer's Tummy Adventures, which is a giant map of all of the places my oldest son went when he was in my tummy. And
Oh,
so
wow.
it was global, right? It was tons of states. And so it's like that was my travel schedule, and it was intense, right?
Mm.
And so I don't think my life would have worked, if I kept
Hmm.
that up. I don't think I could have handled that, right? I know some moms out there say they like work trips. I hated work trips. And maybe because I traveled so much for so long, but especially as soon as I had my
Yeah.
kids, one kid even. And I have a great husband, which, so, like, I can trust him with it and he's got it. But I couldn't handle that. Like,
Yeah.
I did not want to be away. I'm like, no, I've spent this long building my career. Now I want my family. And so
Hmm.
I got really, this is like a big silver lining that when it came to COVID is I had my son. I think I had two trips in kind of fall, winter. He was born April 2019, right? So I had like a 5 month maternity leave. I had one trip I had to leave. That was so hard. Our next big trip was sales conference. So I brought them with me because it was longer. So that made it a little easier. And then COVID hit and lockdown. And so we didn't travel for a couple of years. And then when I came back, in and out of maternity leave, I kind of timed my return a couple of times to miss a trip intentionally. And then as I was getting ready to quit my job, return to office was starting very hard. And I had worked remotely for like 10 years. So I wasn't in an office before COVID, but we
Yeah.
had gotten a new CEO and he's like, everyone's going back, don't care. And so with that, and then travel restarting, that also made it a lot easier to say, I'm going to make this change now because
Yeah.
I don't think I could have been in that situation where I was traveling all over the place, right? Without a say, things I could have been doing virtually,
Mhm.
maybe some not, but I didn't care enough anymore to say like, oh, this work trip is so important. I have to do it. It was
Mhm.
like, no, is it really that important? Like to
Yeah.
me, being here at home is more important. So I think I just got really fortunate with the COVID timing and how everything panned out. And when I went full time on the company, that I really avoided what could have been a very, dark few years for me being on the road so much away from very, very young babies. And so I will always be grateful and kind of how that panned out, that I did not
Yeah.
put myself in a situation where, I felt like my job was just like destroying my family. Like that would have just been, who knows, right? If I didn't do this
Right.
company, what I would have done to try to get out of that type of situation.
Yeah, it just sounds like it really like changed your perspective though. Like how could I keep going like this, right?
Totally. I mean, everything
Yeah.
does when you become a mom, right? Everything's just,
Yeah.
when you're building your career for so long and all of a sudden you have this magical little baby and you don't want to do
Yeah.
anything but stare at them all day.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, I really put a lot of time, energy, and effort into these things that just don't seem like they matter anymore. And so I think
Yeah.
a lot of moms and parents go through that moment, but then the downside is I think a lot of moms sort of almost end up getting forced out of careers because they don't
Mm.
have a good option that offers
Yeah.
flexible work and limited travel and remote work and things like that where you can do both. And so those are really sad circumstances where moms are
Yeah.
forced to pick when they want to be
Mhm.
able to have both, but in a way that works for them and works for
Yeah.
their family.
For sure, and that's the gift you're helping to give people, right?
Hoping. But it's
Yeah.
not just childcare, right? It's so much broader.
Yeah.
Employers have to get on board, right? We need
Right.
flexible work. We need remote work. We don't need to
Yeah.
have a trip for every single thing, right? I understand there's value in in-person engagement and things like that, but
Yeah.
you've got to be thoughtful and do it in a way that works for your team. Maybe have
Yeah.
shorter regional trips once a quarter, right? There's so much innovation and
Yeah.
creative planning that could go into this, right? If you put a bunch of moms in charge of figure out flexible work and how we get together and make it valuable, but it's not too little, not
Right.
too much, right? We could
Absolutely.
figure out the answer, but
Yep.
they haven't turned over the reins to us to do that. But there's so many things that impact this, and it. What a lot of people don't realize is it has such broad economic impact, right? Like I try
Mhm.
to say, childcare hits every single industry, right? It,
Mhm.
it affects, new businesses starting. It affects new businesses staying open and thriving. And it also has really big economic like value impacts, right? There's actually a
Yeah.
stat I use when I talk to investors that $122 billion is lost from the US economy every year due to childcare issues. So that's
Wow.
lost wages, lost revenue, right? Businesses closing, people missing work, all these things that go into that. And you just don't realize how big of an economic impact it has to have such a broken childcare system, right? And the same will go for remote work, right? There's almost 80% of employers are struggling to recruit talent. People are
Mm.
struggling to get matched with the right jobs, right? All of this is so hard, and we have so much benched talent that's very,
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
capable, but because of childcare or non-flexible work options, right, parents just are very limited in their options.
Yeah, absolutely. With that being said, you had talked a little bit about how it can be so hard sometimes, right? And is there a time that you have either hit burnout or just hit a wall and we're like, how am I going to keep going?
Yeah, I mean, I would say last year I probably had several of those moments, right? And a
Yeah.
lot of times it just came down to, I mean, even when I first started, right? When I first quit my job to go full time, I was just so excited, so pumped. We're doing this.
Yeah.
Let's go. And I had actually hired a couple of people
Hmm.
who I worked with before in banking to build the site, to be the engineers. And then, after a few months, they kind of told me, it was a really big project. There's so much
Mm-hmm.
involved, right? I'm like, yeah, but I've been walking you through it for like a
Mm-hmm.
long time now, right? And they're like, well, we found a team in India. It's like 25 people. They've got front-end engineers, back-end engineers, testers, project managers, all these things. They're going to be able to build it in 2 months, and it's just going to be so much better.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I don't know. I never even met them. I never even interviewed them. I knew nothing about this, right? And they'd already kind of farmed it off to this team in India. So I sort of said, okay, well, I guess it's happening. So we'll just roll
Yeah.
with it. So I was told that the website was done and they were supposed to be overseeing it, checking in with them, all these things. And so I was told the website was done. That's when I quit my job and I kind of joined this like meeting late at night, right? Because we were working with India
Yeah.
time. And to do like what I thought would be the handoff. And
Mm-hmm.
I basically found out that nothing was done. Like nothing was
Oh.
working. Like it was just a disaster. And so I
Oh
spent the next
man.
few months on the phone with India, like every night until midnight, just like arguing with people. Just like, I mean, nothing. I mean, they had a fully, laid out prototype. Like everything was working and laid out exactly how it should look. And they're like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's done. I'm like, how does this look the same to you? Please tell me, like, how do you think this is working when it's clearly not working? And so
Yeah.
I got to the point where I just sort of said, I feel like I could be doing this for the next 2 years if I don't make a change. Like
Mm.
we're getting nowhere. And so then I had to kind of pivot and look for US based engineers who could try to fix it and get us launched. And, trying to get engineers to clean up other engineers' messes is not something that typically goes over very well.
Yeah.
Plus, then I was spending a fortune on US based, resources. I really didn't have a technical leader guiding and steering the ship.
Mm-hmm.
So I was the CTO. Right. And so I kind of got to this place where I just felt like we're never going to get there with tech. And I
Mm.
burned through so much capital trying to get this working and patched up. And okay, we had to launch something because we had some timing thing, but it really didn't work well. And so, that went on for a long time. And that also really impacted our ability to fundraise because our product
Yeah.
really wasn't getting the adoption. We really weren't doing paid subscriptions for the provider side at that point because we didn't have all those premium features like the wait list and the online enrollment and all those things we were charging for.
Yeah.
So, there was a lot of times where I just felt like the tech side was so defeated. I hired engineers I feel like weren't doing anything, right? You just never feel like you can count on anybody, which is so hard. And then there was, investors who, strung me along for months and then basically
Mm.
said they're not investing or, San Diego Angel Conference last year was a huge deal, right? There was over 100 companies applied. We
Wow.
made it all the way to the finale, which was the top 4 out of over 100. I was the only female founder, the only pre-seed
Mm.
company. I had some advocates within the group, and it was kind of like that was going to kickstart our momentum, right? Like this
Yeah.
event, us winning this, even if it was third place, like, typically 3 companies win. And so we only had 4, right? And I'm like, I can beat one of these guys, right? Like I just
Mm.
got to make it 3 out of 4. And so I had just so much riding on that.
Yeah.
We were the People's Choice winner. I gave the best pitch of my entire life.
Oh.
And they had come out and said, okay, we think we're going to fund all 4 of you. Will you take a little less and then we'll help you raise the rest? And we all were sort of like, okay, yes, we all agreed. Then they went back and came out a little later, and then they came out with only 2 checks. And we were all
Oh.
looking at each other like, what just happened? They just came out and said all 4 of us are going to win, at least over 50K, right? But like say 60 plus, and then they would help us fill in to get at least to 100, right? And then kind of go and we did not get a check.
Oh,
So
it's
it
heartbreaking.
was, I mean, that was probably one of the darkest moments of my journey. And I was sitting there in a room
Mm.
of 500 people staring at me like
Oh.
I was like, okay, maybe this event-based competition and having to find out that you lost in a room of 500 people is maybe not the best format to hear that. Usually when you get bad news as an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, you're in your little cave and you can have your little cry and then you put on your game face and you get back to it, right? But
Yeah.
that was the first time I had experienced something like that where I just sort of felt like my
Mm.
life was over in front of 500 people looking at me at the same time. And I
Oh.
was like, what are we going to do now? Like there was just nothing. But some of the investors rallied together and started an SPV for us, and they invested on their own outside of the
Wow.
fund. And it wasn't nearly as much as we thought we were going to get, or as much as they even said they were going to help us raise. But it was
Mm.
something, right? And
Yeah.
so it was something that just kind of got us through the next couple months. We had to still kind of just rally and try and call, and just so much work for every little person that contributed towards this SPB, right? Some were like 5K, right? 10K, but we just had to grind for every little check that we could get in. And somehow we just had to stretch and stretch that. And then finally, when we got to fall, we started to, we had solved some big problems. We had figured some things out. And then we started to get some momentum on the fundraising side. We got a lead angel investor, invested 100K. And then we had like 3 VC funds that kind of followed. And so, it's funny because it's like some people are like, oh, I'm not taking checks less than like 100K or this or that. But I'm like, if it weren't for a few of those 5, 10K checks, I would not have made it to the fall to be able and even over the summer, I was trying to find contract work, trying to find a job, something I could do while we kept going. And, for somebody who worked in financial services for 15 years, I probably must have applied to hundreds of things and didn't get an interview anywhere. And I'm like,
Wow.
how am I not a top candidate for some of these jobs? Like I was loyal to this company. I did, sales and leadership and all these things for them. And so, yeah, that was another huge low. I was like, okay, I haven't gotten funded. I'll get a job, right? Just thinking that'll be fine for a little while until we kind of
Yeah.
get to the next milestones. And who would have thought, oh, you can't just go out and get a job anymore. Like that's not how it works. You have to know somebody and like be married to their kid and like send flowers and like to get even an interview anywhere now. And so that was a totally crazy experience to me that, oh, even if I wanted to go back to work, I can't. So now I'm like, oh, this is what moms feel all the time when they're trying to get back into the workforce after having a kid. You can't
Yeah.
just go back. It's not that
Yeah.
easy. And so that was really hard. But, so there was some of those moments where I just thought it was all over. What have I done? I've destroyed
Yeah.
my family's future, all these things. But I've never gotten to the point where I'm like, well, I'm just going to shut down the site and give up. It's always like, I'm
Mm.
going to leave it up. I'm going to keep, trying. And
Yeah.
until I've literally spoken to every person on the planet who could possibly write me a check. And like, that's when I'll give up. Right. And so
Yeah.
I think coming out of those things, then you kind of figure some things out, do some things right, and then you can kind of hit a wave of momentum that sort of carries you
Yeah.
forward. I don't know, how it's all just, it's like we've always had enough just to barely stay alive to
Yeah.
get to the point where then, we have some good things happen. But yeah, those really dark moments of like, oh gosh, I bounced a check to preschool. What am I going to do? Are we going to be
Mm.
able to pay our bills the next few months? Are we going to have to move? Like just crazy things that's when you just really regret, gosh, why did I put us in this situation? I had this cushy corporate job with a stable paycheck and these great benefits and all these things. But, when you get through it, that it's like, no, this is why, right? Like we're good. It's going to be a bumpy road, but we're going to get there. We're going to make it and it will be worth it in the end. But it can get really, really, really hard. Lots of little luxuries that you don't realize you had when you had a stable corporate job, like ordering DoorDash for dinner 3 times a week and,
Yeah.
buying name brand everything, getting whatever you want on Amazon, even having a cleaning lady. Oh, that was the other really dark day. The day the cleaning lady had to go was a very
Oh.
dark day in the house. It was like, okay, we got to cut back what's going to go. And it kept coming back and I said, please don't take the cleaning lady. I can't lose her. So, all
Oh.
of those lifestyle things that you just, don't always
Yeah.
think about as luxuries when you're in the moment. And then, things get tight and you have to start
Mm-hmm.
penny pinching every little thing and things like the cleaning lady go. It's very, very
Oh.
hard, but you get through it.
Yeah. So speaking of getting through it, what are ways now that you feel like you can measure your success as a business leader and as a parent?
Oh, I think that's obviously, the never ending struggles. I think when you're from a business owner perspective, a lot of it comes down to just like milestones and
Yep.
progress. And you can't, and it's really hard when, and you have to give projections and forecasts and all these things, but it's like, this is also dependent on how much I raise because sure, I could hit huge targets if I, raise $1 million in the next couple months, but you can't count on that happening. And so for me, it's like, all right, first, we'll focus on the product, the team, right? Like I had to completely rebuild the engineering team, right? I had to find a CTO who was really capable, who could work for equity, who actually knew what they were doing, who I didn't have to micromanage and worry about it, right?
Yeah.
And so after a really long, hard journey, I finally found the right person there. And that made such a huge difference.
Right.
And then he
Yeah.
helped me find, right, a couple of really good engineers who were offshore, but are full-time resources that were capable, that were good English speakers, that were time zone aligned, right? All of these things that make quality of life better as an entrepreneur.
So
And
you're
so the
not up
tech
at
side is
midnight every
fun.
night and yeah.
Yes, exactly, right? Never see your spouse because you're, working all night every night. And so those types
Yeah.
of things helped a lot. And then really perfecting the product and building a product that we're really proud of, that we really know like has all these features that, it's still not to the point of this is what the full dream looks like, but this is going to be something really valuable people will be willing to use, willing to pay for, that will really help. And it's a great, step in the right direction. Like we finally have a really good product that we're getting ready to launch now in May. And then it'll be more user based, right? Let's get to
Yeah.
1,000 users. Let's get to 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, 10,000. So it'll be more milestone based. Then you can start kind of getting more revenue thresholds. So I think it's just, you have to take it like every kind of goalpost, every, at a time. Like, it's like, okay, what's this next big thing we're trying to do? What's this next? And when you do it and you accomplish it, and when you can tell your investors or your users, hey, we did what we said we were going to do, right? Like we
Yeah.
delivered, right? Without your money. And so then it's like a lot easier to say, okay, now we really, and that's what we're doing now. Like now we really need to close some additional funding so we can transition from build mode to growth mode and really be able to promote this and win some, government contracts and other bigger deals. That's a much better sell to investors
Yeah.
than fund us so we can build this and figure it out and hope people want it and all those things. So,
Yeah.
sometimes it's almost better that certain investors pass on you in the moment, because as painful as it is, sometimes when you can circle back around with them, you're in a way better position. And they're like,
Yeah.
wow, you accomplished a lot. You've really been making progress and all of that with very little funding. Like that de-risks it for them. And so
Yeah.
that really makes it so that they can figure out, okay, well, if you've done all this without much funding, like you could probably do a lot more with funding. And so I think it's just about, okay, now we need to raise this amount. We need to do this. We need to do this. So it's more like those bite-sized milestones that you feel like you can make progress. And as little as those things sound and not a big deal, it actually really is, because there's, a very
Yeah.
small percentage of people that have a business idea that ever do anything with it. And then of those people that do something with it, there's a whole nother percentage that just get stuck in ideation forever. They want everything to be perfect. They don't know how to start, what to do first, how to understand what they're going to build. And so they just get stuck in this kind of vicious cycle and they never actually go to market with anything. So I think, being able to just make bite-sized things of progress, not a lot of people can do that. And so that's what I've kind of learned, is I've met so many founders who have just end up vanishing. And then as I talk to more people, it's like, yeah, some of them can't make progress. They can't
Yeah.
get from 0 to 1, right? And so I'm like, well, I'm crawling from 0 to 1, then I'm crawling from 1 to 2, but so many people never get there. And so I think you have to give yourself some grace and just say,
Yeah.
it's not about raising millions of dollars and exiting in a year, right? That's not going to happen. It's about these bite-sized milestones that then turn into slightly longer, bigger ones, that then turn into some bigger leaps, right? That then allow you to get some bigger funding, that then allow you to expand and grow and things like that. So every single bite-sized, accomplishment, even in the early days, it's like, did I form my corporation right? Do I have all these things that, like, those are your milestones when you're first getting, do I need to file any patents or trademarks? Like everything that you accomplish is worthy of a little celebration and a milestone, because you're making progress towards that end goal, which is something that a whole lot of people out there, the vast majority of people, will never do.
Yeah. Totally true. And with that, how does that help you be a better parent?
I think there's a lot of things, I think parenting and leadership are so hand in hand. And there's so many things that I've learned being a parent that have made me a better leader. And I wish I could go back to the days where I was a 21-year-old bank manager, riding everybody so hard, business, sales, that's all that matters, right? And it's like, I feel like I need to go back and give all those people a hug, who just
Yep.
bared with me, because the empathy and patience that parenting teaches you, and just, how much you care about people, and how, same thing, like how you think about oh, you want to leave early to go to your kids' thing? You should definitely do that, right? And like
Yeah.
just taking the time more to care about, the people side and their families
Mm-hmm.
and what matters outside of work. Like leadership
Yeah.
really helps you and just, being able to be, light with people and laugh with people you work with. Like you need that. And, the notion of flexible work, I think there's probably not a lot of moms that don't totally get that.
Yeah.
But for me, it's like, I couldn't ever imagine having an office and making people go into it as a business owner,
Mm-hmm.
right? And some people like, in-person collaboration and like having the option, but it's like when you build a company, those cultural things that you have to do kind of day one, it's like, what is going to be the culture, right? When we do grow and we're a big company, how are we going to attract top
Mm-hmm.
talent? And how, I had to find how to get somebody to be the CTO of my company and basically work for free for equity and take a
Yeah.
gamble that we're going to like, how do you sell that? And how do you make that worth somebody's while? And so I think
Right.
parenting really just shapes who you are and how you are as a leader. And I think sometimes, leadership comes into parenting for sure too. And, it's not usually a problem until I do it to my husband. And he's like, can you not, business me right now? Right. Like, you use certain terminology right with
For
yourself
sure.
and they're like, oh gosh. But, it is helpful. And I think, raising three boys, I'm glad, they have a mom CEO that they can grow up and see. And we have a household with two very equal parents, and they're going to grow up seeing like that. That's how you do
Yep.
things. And that's what your role is. So I think all of the things just matter and affect each other so much. And, working on something you're really proud of and you feel like is making a difference is something that makes you
Yeah.
feel like you're doing something for your kids, even though it can be painful as you're going through it and building it.
Yeah.
Like they'll see when it all comes to fruition, right? And they'll remember
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my gosh, these are all the things and how to get there. So
Yeah.
I think they're all so interconnected in so many ways. And definitely being a parent has absolutely made me be a better leader. And I think, how leadership affects your parenting is just so personality dependent, right? But
Yeah.
like, how I think of it for my household is like we want, I've always wanted to run like a very well-oiled operation at work,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where things are efficient, what we're doing makes sense, we're not wasting time on silly things. And so, for us, we try to apply that at home too. And it's like we're avid about sleep training. We prep all the lunches the night before, everyone's shoes are laid out, waters are in their backpacks. Like so like the notion of having like a well-oiled machine where there's lots of
Mm-hmm.
routine and things like that. Like for us, I think a lot of kids just do really well when they know what to expect and they know
For
what to
sure.
do and they know, what's going to happen when. And so kind of having that business mentality of like, we don't need to spend time with that, pick your battles, all of those types of
Yeah.
things really help at home and keep our household running well. Is like, I've got three kids that are great sleepers. We do all these things to prepare to make mornings easier. We've trained them. This is what you do when you get home from school and where you put everything. And so it makes doing both easier, that they know the flow, that they're capable of doing some things too, that everyone kind of knows what to expect at every given time, that they're well rested, which means entrepreneurs aren't well rested, but my husband gets enough sleep and I have time in the evening to do all the things I need to do. Like all of those things really matter and make a difference.
Yeah.
And it would be really difficult if either one of the things were not, operating smoothly or, and I didn't know what to expect. When can I work? When can I have meetings? When can I do this? How can I do that? So all of those things, affect each other and can really make or break you either on the home front or the work front.
Yeah, wow. Well, I just see so much passion in you even as a parent right now as you're speaking, but how you run your household, how you run your company, what you're doing for childcare and women and everything. It's just truly remarkable. And I really want to thank you so much for sharing your story and keeping going. Your grit is incredible. So thank you so much for, being so honest and open for our listeners to hear today. Really, really appreciate your time, Olivia.
Yeah, thank you, Lory, and thanks for putting out content for working parents. We need more of it.
Absolutely. Thanks.